This is Booked on Rock. I'm Eric Senich. Our guest this episode, Chris Sutton, author of Alice Cooper in the 1970s. The 1970s was the decade that saw the arrival of Alice Cooper as a major force across the media. Chris Sutton explores the story of Alice Cooper, the band, and Alice, the solo performer, from their early years through to the end of the decade. A roller coaster ride of classic albums and singles. The songs recorded in the 1970s still dominate his live sets to this day. The book features all new interview material from key figures, including Michael Bruce, Dennis Dunaway, and Neal Smith from the original band, Prakash John from the solo years, and Ernie Cefalu, whose company Pacific Eye and Ear designed the sleeve packaging. Several other musicians, concert promoters, and even the band's first roadie have also contributed their thoughts. All of the albums and singles, from Don't Blow Your Mind until From the Inside, are examined in detail, along with related archive releases and songs that didn't make the cut. In the course of putting the book together, much new information came to light that will be of huge interest to hardened collectors and new fans alike. The book is an essential guide to Alice Cooper and the decade the band helped to define. Chris Sutton has been a fan of Alice Cooper since 1972, and the famous debut appearance on Top of the Pops. The reunion of the band for their UK tour in 2017 stands as one of his happiest memories. He manages Smethwick Heritage Centre Museum and has written several publications for them. He's also written several plays. Alice Cooper in the 1970s is his first venture into music writing, with others to follow. He lives in Great Malvern, UK. To hear Chris's curated playlist of songs discussed in this episode and more, check out the show notes page. Chris, thanks so much for being on the podcast. It's great to have you on.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me.
When did you become an Alice Cooper fan? Was it from seeing the band's 72 appearance on Top of the Pops, as you write?
It was absolutely that, what it was. Do you want me to fill you in on what happened?
Absolutely, yeah.
In Britain at the time, the only way you could hear music was on Radio 1, or alternatively would be Top of the Pops, which is on a Thursday night. And Mum and Dad had booked us away for 2 weeks at a Butlins camp, like a holiday camp. And all the way on the coach, it would come on the radio, School's Out. When we got to the holiday camp, they were broadcasting over the Tannoy speaker system, Radio 1, so you'd hear it during the day. Then you'd hear it on the jukeboxes in the bars and places around the camp. So it was a real buzz. And then on the Thursday night, because nobody got a television in their rooms in the accommodation, they had 2 TV rooms on site, one for BBC and one for ITV. So if you wanted to watch Top of the Pops, you had to dash into the BBC room. Then you had to get there to watch Tomorrow's World, whether you wanted to or not. There was a programme on before to book your seat or even be in the room. And just when that came on, School's Out, the older people in the room were going, oh, my God, what's this? This is disgusting, degenerate, terrible. All the young people are going, that's even better than I thought. That's absolutely for me. And it was just one of those big light bulb moments, great song, great performance, terrific riff. And they got the attitude and the image and just sold me completely. And from then on, I was an Alice Cooper fan.
And I think if I'm correct, I did get a chance to hear a recent interview you did. Are you from Birmingham, England, originally?
Yeah, I grew up in Birmingham. I lived there all my life till a few years ago. We moved to Malvern, and I run a museum in Smethwick called Smethwick Heritage Centre.
So Birmingham. So did you ever run into Ozzy Osbourne or any of the guys from Black Sabbath?
Yes, I actually spent an entire afternoon with Ozzy Osbourne having drinks and a chat on his first solo tour, Blizzard of Oz. And he was doing a signing session after the gig the night before in Virgin, in Bull Street in Birmingham. And there was nobody left at the end, just 2 or 3 of us. And we walked down through Birmingham with him to his hotel, with him telling tales and shaking hands along the way, and sat and had drinks with him. And he was a bit less wild in those days, if you like. And he was a lovely chap. Geezer Butler I've met from Black Sabbath, and Tony Iommi several times.
They're all from Birmingham.
Yeah, home of metal.
What's Birmingham like? They say it is. It does foster that sound, the Black Sabbath sound. It can be working class.
Yeah, it was a working class city of many trades, 1,000 trades, I think they said, and it's part of the industrial heartlands of Britain, in the West Midlands. So you've got that kind of thing which they reckon filters through into the heavy metal rock music. But, then again, at the same time, we were the home of UB40, kind of one of Britain's top reggae bands. So you've got that side to it as well. But certainly, I think, with John Bonham, Robert Plant, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, You did kind of grow up with that. And when I was a teenager, you go to the gigs at the Town Hall in Birmingham, and I was there as many times a week as I could be. And it was basically the same audience kind of shuffling between all those bands. A few people might drop out of one gig, then they'd be back for the next. But, you know, you had your denim jackets and you were just, it was like being part of a fantastic club, seeing all these bands.
So getting back to the book, you begin the book by stressing the importance of getting new content and perspective from those who were there at the time the music of Alice Cooper was recorded or performed, and it's quite a list, including some from the early solo Alice years who had never been asked about their work, which is really cool that you had them part of the book.
Well, it all happened, just so that listeners will know, it all happened really during the lockdown in Britain, looking for something else to do. And I approached Sonic Bond Publishing, Stephen Lamb, who runs that company, who were looking for authors. And I offered to do Alice Cooper in the 70s. And he said, sure, you know, go for it. What can you do? Send me an example of the kind of thing you can do. And I thought then I'll try and get hold of some of these guys. And I just thought there's so many musicians. I'll just try getting hold of them via the various sources that were there. And a surprising number of them agreed wholeheartedly that they would do it. And it was quite nerve-wracking doing the interviews, or some people just wanted questions sending on email. But it was a very interesting experience. And as you say, many of the solo musician years particularly have never really been asked. No one's ever bothered asking them. The one guy, John Trapay, who plays on Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, his actual contributions to the album are way more than what's actually credited on the album sleeve or Wikipedia. And he didn't know that. He actually went back and played the album and then talked to me while he was playing it and saying, oh, yeah, that's me playing that riff. That's me on second guitar. So I've got to change the Wikipedia credits for him because I'm certain he's absolutely right about that.
It's amazing, too, because you would think journalists, folks like yourself, myself, who do these types of things with a sense of curiosity would think these are the guys with the stories. These are the folks who can tell you things that you've never heard before. The other guys, they're probably more often than not going to tell you things you've already heard before. So these guys there's gold.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Alan Schwartzberg, who's played with so many people over the years. I mean, all of your listeners will have Schwartzberg on something in their collection. The story he tells me about how Bob Ezrin couldn't get across to him what he wanted on the drum part for the song Wish You Were Here on Alice Cooper Goes to Hell. So he took him all the way across New York to his apartment to put on the album in the Court of the Crimson King Crimson, to play the title track. And right at the end, you get those drum fills that Mike Giles plays. And he said, that's what I want you to play on Wish You Were Here, that kind of drumming. And this is back in the day, you couldn't get it up on your phone or on a computer. You had to actually take him to where a vinyl copy could be played so you could hear it. And that was a nice story, I think. So I think they all added some. I didn't want the book to just be about what I thought about Alice Cooper's records, because I knew I was going to say I like most of them, which I do in that era. And I wanted somebody else's input. I did try to get Alice's, but I was fairly sure that I would get a lot of the other musicians to agree to do it. And they did quite wholeheartedly.
I think people should read the book just for the simple reason that if you've listened to Alice's music, as many Alice fans have thousands and thousands of times, you may hear a song differently after reading the book. Yeah,
I hope so. That was partly the intention, was to make people go, almost have to pick up the albums or play them digitally or whatever, because they go, I've never heard that before. What's he talking about? Which part's this? And that's why at some points I tend to put in where something happens in a song like a solo, because there's different people playing those solos to what people think is actually going on the records. Certainly from the later period of the Cooper group, we like $1 Billion Babies, there's so many other guitarists who are appearing on that album. I thought it'd be nice to tell people who actually is doing what and when.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, Dick Wagner, I think of Dick Wagner. Now, he is credited on these Alice albums, but isn't he one of the guys on some of those Kiss albums not credited, right? He's one of the ghost guitarists, I think, on a few of those tracks from Destroyer.
Yeah, originally it was said he was on one track on Destroyer, which is Sweet Pain. I think he played the solo on that. But since then, it's turned out that he also plays the acoustic guitar on Beth. And I think he's also on Flaming Youth as well, it's now reckoned. But as you said, he's not credited at all. He just got a big session fee, which I think was something like $90 or $100 for a day's work, which was a lot of money in 76, 75 when he did it. But then you get the thing, there's a difference between Alice's solo years and the band years. And obviously a lot of people will be aware of this, but originally Alice Cooper was a band, not a solo artist, which, I didn't quite understand back in the day, certainly when Alice's Welcome to My Nightmare album came out. Over in Britain, we weren't really aware that it was a solo album that was coming out. We were kind of looking at it going, well, where's Dennis, Mike, Neil and Glenn? And I just thought the band would get back together, and that didn't happen.
Yes, I remember you're right about that, which we'll get to, and we'll also work up to that official change that Alice made with his name. But Alice's story begins while he's in high school in Phoenix, Arizona, and at that time he is Vincent Furnier. That's the pronunciation.
Vincent Furnier, yeah.
Furnier,
yeah,
okay.
So.
His first band, Vincent Furnier's first band, called the Earwigs. You spoke with the sister of guitarist Glenn Buxton to give fans some perspective on Alice. Then Vincent's early days in the garage band from Phoenix, the Earwigs, who eventually became the Spiders. Some hot summers playing in that garage. Can you talk about those days?
Yeah. That was Janice, who was Glenn's sister, who's kind of, I guess, the custodian of Glenn Buxton, who was the lead guitar player in the Earwigs and all through the Alice Cooper group years. Neal Smith at one point said that Glenn Buxton made Keith Richards look like a Boy Scout, and that I think is certainly true. But yeah, at that time, back when they were the Earwigs, they were like anybody else. They were copyists, really. They were just trying to emulate and catch some of that Yardbirds, Stones, Beatles, whatever vibe, absorb those things. And I think the first time they appeared on stage, at their college, was an epochal moment, having people out there kind of cheering and clapping and liking what you do. Who's not going to like that when you're that age? And I think that really set them on their way.
Now, this would be around 66, 67?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the band eventually moves from Phoenix to Los Angeles, spring of 1967. They not only changed locations, but band names too.
Yeah, they became the Spiders. I think that's a kind of a link to the Beatles, Beatles, spiders, insects, that kind of thing. And then the influences start to show, really. The Spiders single, Don't Blow Your Mind, is, I think it's a kind of a forgotten classic, really. It didn't sell anything, didn't do anything. But that single features probably Dennis Dunaway's first great bass part for me. And it would be called an undiscovered classic. I really think that now. It's still a great song. They're really giving it a good go, and it's terrific.
December of 67, there was a pivotal point, where the band was offered a deal only if they get rid of Alice.
So the band has said so that Dennis Dunaway was on bass by that time. Neal Smith was now on drums, Michael Bruce guitar, Glenn Buxton guitar. Yeah, that was apparently so. The weak link in the band when they went and did this audition was thought to be the vocalist. And I think there is some truth in that. I think probably Alice hadn't found his voice, and he would tell you that himself now. He hadn't got to that point of being Alice. And in fact, really, I don't think reaches his full potential until the Love It to Death album in 1971, recorded in 70, really. I think that's when he, under Bob Ezrin's tutelage, he does find out what he can actually do, get some power into his voice.
If you listen to those early albums, it's very psychedelic. It doesn't even sound like Alice.
No, absolutely not. After they were the Spiders, they changed their name to the Nas. We should probably mention that. And then they had to change the name because of Todd Rundgren's band, just doing better than them, called the Nas. But they did a great single, Wonder Who's Loving Her Now, which is another kind of psychedelic classic. And as I say in the book, a whole album of material by the Nas, I think, could have been quite an interesting project, really. But that first Alice Cooper album they eventually come out with in 1969, recorded for Frank Zappa's Straight Records, you can see the kind of the trail back to the Nas in that again, as you've just inferred, is quite a psychedelic way out album. Pretty's for You. That was that came as quite a shock to us over here in the UK, because we hadn't heard the album when it came out. Really, most people, when it came out in 1969, most people in Britain heard it when it came out in 73, when it was reissued after $1 Billion Babies. So you've got all those hits, Hello, Hooray, Elected, No More Mr. Nice Guy, that the listeners will know. And then you suddenly buy Pretty's for You when it's reissued and get this shock of what the band used to sound like, really, I guess.
So much of a difference. He hadn't found his character voice yet, which is where we get to with the band now called the Alice Cooper Band, but also Vincent Furnier changes his name to Alice Cooper. He legally changed it.
Yeah, he did. With the benefit of hindsight, you can kind of see a problem coming there, really. I mean, I can hear it in your voice, really. The band was called Alice Cooper, and there's various versions of how they get that name, whether it's from a seance and the name comes through as his name is Alice Cooper, this witch, and so on and so forth, and all the various stories about how they came up with the name Alice Cooper. I think there's another one where they suggested it just sounded like one of those kind of women with guitars, acoustic singer-songwriter things, you know, like Joni Mitchell, that kind of stuff. And then you get the shock of finding these five guys coming at you when you book them for a gig. And I think there's probably a lot of truth that might have been the real reason behind it. But certainly Vince changing his name to Alice Cooper certainly lays the seeds for problems ahead, because people, do you know, the same way as when people saw Jethro Tull and they thought that his name was Jethro Tull. It's actually Ian Anderson, the singer, Ian Anderson, Jethro Tull. But this was even worse because the singer was called Alice Cooper.
And it became an issue with the band, but it also was an issue with Alice himself, because he would later say he got so into that character that he lost sense of who he really was. Thankfully, he came back around in later years. These days, he's doing great. But as we know, by the end of the 70s into the 80s, he was in rough shape.
Yeah, he certainly was adopting a persona on stage, which was Alice. But then off stage, he couldn't get that switch between being Alice on stage and Vince, if you like, off stage. So he was Alice off stage as well, which is, was a recipe for disaster, really, as time went on.
He got his look from a Betty Davis, Joan Crawford film, the classic film. He saw the makeup and how they looked, and he thought, that's how I want to have my character.
I think was it Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
That's wild.
The epochal thing, I mean, they came out with a second album after Pretty's for You, which was the album Easy Action, which they were kind of rushed into doing a bit. One thing I wanted to mention to you was the interesting thing with the original Cooper band was the influences. They were coming from sort of Dave Brubeck kind of jazz, Yardbirds rock and roll, and John Barry kind of soundtracks, West Side Story, as well as that, that kind of thing. So if you put those three things together in a melting pot, you have Alice Cooper in a nutshell there, soundtracks, West Side Story, jazz, and sort of Yardbirds, Stones, rock and roll. And there you've got the early Cooper group, really.
And a lot of people come into play here that contribute to the success of the Alice Cooper band and Alice himself. One is Shep Gordon. He enters the story around 68, 69. There was a great documentary on him a few years back, too. He plays a big role in the band's success. Talk about Shep Gordon a little bit.
Yeah, well, Shep, interestingly, they were actually on their way to sign with Frank Zappa's Straight Records. That had actually happened. Zappa had that famous rehearsal at his home where they'd turned up at the wrong time. They'd turned up at something like 6 or 7 in the morning instead of 6 or 7 in the evening. And he'd come downstairs to hear them actually sort of tuning up in his garage or whatever it was and sign them. And he'd wanted to change their name to Alice Cookies, I think was his original idea, and put the album in a tin as lots of 7-inch discs or something like that. He had all these mad ideas. Somebody who should remain nameless told me that they thought that he'd sign them as a bit of a lost leader, that basically Zappa could get money for signing artists and actually make more money if the records didn't sell too well by keeping the advances that had been paid.
Wow.
I'm sure that's not true, though. But then basically Shep Gordon had gone into the shop, the boutique where Cindy Smith worked, who was Neal Smith, the drummer's sister. And he basically had said that he was the West Coast management for the Left Bank, along with his partner, Joe Greenberg. Listeners might know that the Left Bank had a big hit with Walk Away Renee, that the Four Tops covered.
Yep.
And in fact, he wasn't the West Coast management for the Left Bank at all, I don't think. But he was looking to manage a band. So she persuaded Gordon to come and meet her boyfriend's band, Alice Cooper. And he became their manager on a handshake. I don't think he's ever signed any contract whatsoever legally at all with anyone in the band. It was all done on a handshake. So by the time that the Cooper group go to sign with Straight Records, Shep Gordon is now their manager. So when Frank Zappa last saw them, there was no manager. And a few days later, there's now a manager. And I think Shep tells in his book that Zappa's management team were not altogether happy about that, to put it mildly. I think they thought they were going to get the management of the group, the publishing, the whole 9 yards, you know. Instead, they've got this guy stood there who I think he admits wasn't really sure about what he was doing, but he was a confident man, Shep Gordon. He knew how to do his best for the band, which he does. Some of the legendary stunts, publicity coups that he and Joe Greenberg got involved with the Cooper group, are just legendary. Some of those stories of the things they've managed to pull off with the band.
Can you talk about what Alice described as a light bulb moment, the moment Detroit became the band's new home?
Yeah, they've actually played a festival in Detroit with Iggy and the Stooges, and they'd been looking for their spiritual home around the United States, somewhere they could base themselves. It wasn't happening for them in Los Angeles. They felt they weren't getting anywhere further in Los Angeles at that time, so they were looking for somewhere else to locate to. And it became Detroit because of the reaction to the Detroit audience to Alice Cooper, they'd seen the MC5 and Iggy and the Stooges. And Alice Cooper, they just felt they fitted in with this kind of wildly enthusiastic crowd mentality who just liked their rock and roll and were so enthusiastic about the Cooper band. That's where they relocated to Detroit. So that's how that came about.
The chicken incident got the band some press. At a big festival in Toronto, this is a well-known story. Alice threw a chicken into the audience thinking it could fly. How it got on stage at all isn't certain, but what is certain is that the audience pulled it apart and threw the remains back at the stage. This is one of those Shep Gordon moments too, right? He thinks, hey, we got to run with this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, Dennis talks about it. Dennis Dunaway, the bass player, said the whole place just went silent. Absolute shock. You can imagine, he said there's blood and feathers and this mess and this silence, people going, what has just happened there? This is surreal. And the band, meanwhile, is supposed to go off and come back on and back Gene Vincent was the plan, And meanwhile, there's just this surreal kind of atmosphere in the stadium where the promoters are absolutely shocked and everyone's trying to decide who's going to be responsible for this, who's going to take the flag. Certainly not me. I knew nothing about this. We didn't know they were going to do this, And I think at that point, Shep realizes that this is going to get local publicity. It's going to go national. It's going to be a huge story. And that's bad news, isn't it, Eric? No. They realised it was just news. It's publicity. You've suddenly got the band's name everywhere. There really is no bad publicity. And I think that's the first time this had kind of happened, really. Before then, I think with the Cooper Group, it really is a changing thing with them, that any publicity is good publicity. And they were so masterful, Shep Gordon and Joe Greenberg, at getting the band publicity that just got their names in the papers. The one we'll come to later, I think the thing that happened in London, in 1972 on the Empire Paul Wembley, I'm sure we're going to come to that in a bit. That I think is the best one that they pulled off. But absolutely masterful stuff. And he set them on their way. I think Toronto brought them to, national publicity. They still needed the music to go with it. So they were getting the publicity. What they needed was that final piece in the puzzle, really, to take them to the next level.
That was really the beginning of shock rock. Hate to put labels on things, but that's what it was called. He's the king of shock rock.
You see, I don't know what it's like in America then, but in Britain then we were kind of, I can only speak about over here, but we just saw it for what it was, really. It was just kind of like theatrics. People have always done theatrics. I think Groucho Marx, he says that it was just, he looked at it and thought, it's vaudeville. It's what we did. But it's different now because, it's the 1970s. It will be different. But that's basically what they're doing. Shock has changed over the years. Things are shocking. Alice himself has said that what they did then, it wouldn't even merit a paragraph probably today.
But back then, that was a big deal. Yeah. Yeah, let's get to that 72 incident. Talk about the 72 incident.
Yeah, well, this again was masterful. Despite having, Schools Out topping the British charts and so on and so forth, they hadn't managed to sell out the Empire Paul Wembley, where they were supported by Roxy Music. And obviously you want it to be a sellout. He's going to get the press there. And the seats, it just wasn't selling out. So what they did was, there's this famous picture of Alice naked, except for a snake wrapped around the important parts. And so Shep had it blown up to an enormous size and put on the back of a trailer, a lorry. Yeah. So basically, there's this lorry with this enormous poster of Alice Cooper with the Empire Paul Wembley dates and stuff on it. the Naked Alice, and he tells the driver to take it to London's Piccadilly Circus in the rush hour, the busiest time, stall the truck, and no matter what happens, do not move the truck. No matter if anyone comes in, do not move the truck. In the meantime, strangely, the local TV stations, the national stations, the press and everyone have been informed that there's likely to be something happening in Piccadilly Circus that might interest them. So they're there to photograph this. The police are getting angrier and angrier and trying to persuade the driver to move the truck, and he can't move the truck because it's broken down. And, of course, the driver gets arrested, marched off to the cells. Front page of the newspapers, it's on the TV, it's on the radio, everything. Empire Ball Wembley sells out. Job done. And the driver got paid off, did well out of it as well. Shep paid for him to get released, bailed out and sorted him out. It's just masterful stuff, masterful stuff.
The rest is rock and roll and Alice Cooper history. Yeah.
Yeah.
So go back a little bit again, that debut Alice Cooper Band album, Pretty's for You, released June of 1969. And you offer up some background and your thoughts on each track in the book on all of the albums. None of the songs became Alice classics, but the debut single Reflected, later reworked as Alice's classic Elected, definitely influenced by the psychedelic era, like I just mentioned a little while ago. Your thoughts on that first album?
Yeah, well, it's, I think, well, again, Dennis, I think it's worth mentioning, and Neil and stuff, that they were keen to tell me they were actually rehearsing the album, playing it through in the studio, and weren't aware that some of those takes were actually going to be used on the album. So it does actually sound like a band playing through the songs as a run through at times, because that's exactly what they were doing. That being said, there are a few overdubs on it. They overdub their own guinea pigs chewing lettuce on 10 Minutes Before the Worm. But it is a sort of a very psychedelic album, Eric, and there's some great tracks on there. I think Levity Ball is probably my favourite track on there. That's a pretty far out number with some amazing guitar work on it. And they actually use a live version of that, interestingly enough. Reflected does show what they are capable of, because the melody was reused as Elected a few years later. Funnily enough, one of their best tracks at the time, they didn't even record for the album. And I asked the guys in the band, why did you leave a song called Nobody Likes Me? That's such a great song off the album, and nobody seemed able to tell me how they'd not recorded it for the album. Came out later on a flexi disc on the Killer Tour program and has been on compilations. But that song Nobody Likes Me should really have been on Pretty's for You.
The Booked on Rock podcast will return after this. We're back with more of the Booked on Rock podcast. I want to talk about the influences these guys had, but let's make sure we get that Alice Cooper Band lineup out there because it's so important. Alice on lead vocals, Glenn Buxton on lead guitar, Michael Bruce on rhythm guitar and keyboards, Dennis Dunaway on bass, Neal Smith on drums. Dennis and Glenn,
you can also add into the Alice plays harmonica.
Right,
in fact, Michael Bruce plays quite a fair bit of lead guitar as well, he'd be keen to tell you.
Okay.
It's not all Glenn.
Yep.
Dennis
and Glenn were with Alice from day one, right? They're in the Earwigs, and then Michael joins in 66, Neil in 67. They're all from the same area, though?
Well, fundamentally, they all end up in the same area.
Right.
But Neal Smith and Glenn Buxton are from Ohio, so they've come in from there, when the rest of them are basically Phoenix guys. Yeah.
Okay. So what are their influences? What did they listen to growing up? The Beatles, I'm sure, plays a big role in this, right?
Yeah, they do. I think for the image and the look and the feel of the Beatles and what they did, and the kind of the fan base that they'd managed to attract, and which young men wouldn't have wanted that kind of a fan base? I think we probably all would. But the band that they consistently cite as being most important to them is the Yardbirds.
Interesting.
That's the one that they actually supported the Yardbirds when they were playing as the Spiders and the Nas.
That was their first big gig, right? Opening for the Yardbirds. That was their first big break.
Yeah. And in fact, they used to do Train Kept a Rolling, which the Yardbirds covered themselves. They used to play that off and on. Some of the reunion gigs that the Cooper Band have done, they've played Train Kept a Rolling as well. The other influence, big jazz influences from the likes of Dave Brubeck, Blue Rondo, Alaturk, that kind of stuff. They're really big on jazz. The Bond film soundtracks, all of the band talked about how Goldfinger was such a major album for them to listen to, the soundtrack to the Goldfinger album.
Isn't that cool? What an interesting mix of influences.
You can hear it, particularly on the early albums. As they come to the second album, there are moments you can actually hear those influences very clearly coming through.
Easy Action.
Yeah, Easy Action. It came out in 1970 for Straight Records, Zappa's label again. It was recorded in a bit of a hurry, I think. It's not as good as it could be. There's a definite signs of some filler going on in it, as though they're just trying to fill the album out. Curiously, Michael Bruce sings lead vocals on 2 songs on that, which is, interesting.
Thankfully, that was a time when bands had a chance, because there's that point we get to in the music industry where you have one album out and it doesn't do well. See you later.
Oh, absolutely true. And I think for the Cooper Group, Easy Action would have been their last album unless something had happened. And luckily for them, something did happen. They got their break big time.
Love It to Death.
Yeah, Love It to Death. Indeed, Love It to Death.
More specifically from the album I'm 18, number 35 on Billboard. And this is where we get to another important guy, Bob Ezrin. He enters the story. He plays a huge role in Alice's career. He is what you could say the George Martin to the Beatles is Bob Ezrin to Alice. Very important role he plays. What is it that he contributes to that band right away that makes the difference?
The main thing he contributes right away, the first thing he does, he actually persuades his production company, Nimbus 9, that, yes, they do want to record Alice Cooper. Shep Gordon had sent copies of Easy Action to the guys at Nimbus 9 who would basically produce the Guess Who's albums, and they were not impressed with Easy Action at all. And they sent the newest recruit, which was Ezrin, to go and, I suppose, basically just go and listen to them and then say, no, we're not going to bother producing you. But Ezrin actually went to see them live and saw there was something there, that they really did have something. And I think Ezrin's light bulb moment was a song he thought was called I'm Edgy. And he went backstage and said, that song, I'm Edgy, and they were laughing at him because he was I'm 18. Which
That's funny.
Was, which I think was about, something like 15, 16 minutes long and very blues-based. You can hear I'm 18 is a blues song, really. So the main thing I think that what he does is he sharpens their songwriting skills, sharpens the arrangements, tightens everything up, which is something I don't think they could have done themselves at that stage, certainly at that stage. What Ezrin does is he just takes it and shapes it and molds it, and they almost reinvent what Alice Cooper could be with the I'm 18 single and the masterful Love It to Death album, which came out in 1971, Love It to Death, and actually plays through. If you listen to it, it's almost like having a concert, as you probably have noticed. The sequencing is just superb.
Yeah, and I'm 18. That's the big track.
Yeah. That's just... It gets in, it gets out. You've got a guitar solo. The choruses are just superb. It's just... it's a My Generation, isn't it? For the 1970s, I guess. I'm 18 it's the rebellion song for the early 70s, and it's still one of the best songs. It's the song Alice has played most live as a band and as a solo performer more than any other song, even more than School's Out.
And Alice seemed to have that sense lyrically. I'm 18. He's connecting with that young audience. Yeah,
there's a line I really like in it where he's complaining about this, he's complaining about that, about how difficult it is being I'm 18, and you've got that bluesy feel going on in the background, and the choruses are so catchy. But it's that line when he goes, I'm 18 and I like it. So you get that little switch. He's been complaining all the way through the song, but he goes, I like it. I'm 18 and I like it.
And the emphasis on I like it too, vocally. He's found his voice at that point.
He has, and to give credit where it's due, Glenn Buxton's lead guitar is superb on I'm 18, and what Dennis and Neil are doing in the rhythm section is not really conventional as to what rhythm sections would be playing. There's a lot of melodical movement going on in the bass and drums, more so than you would expect in something of that nature, short, sharp single. So have a listen out to that. Do listen to what they're doing in the background.
Another Alice classic, Ballad of Dwight Fry, one of my all-time favorites, an homage to the horror film actor Dwight Fry. A couple great pieces of behind-the-scenes notes on this one. Can you talk about the story behind the child's voice and also how an Alka-Seltzer tablet was used in this one? Yeah,
well, some of this is Ezrin's input coming in. The child's voice was a friend of the band, Monica Lauer. And she just happened to be there. And they wanted, the mommy, where's daddy? He's been gone for so long. And one of the band could have done it. Neal Smith used to do it live, the drummer. But he said he never did it like Monica. She was one of those friends they had who used to bring them food when they were short of food and stuff and get them bits and pieces. She was there listening in, and she contributed that chilling voice. It's actually, it's effectively in two parts, because the track before it, Second Coming, kind of is the intro in a way to Ballad of Dwight Frye. It's the kind of the overture to it that leads you into it. The guy's got problems. Time is getting close. I read it on a poster, and the shock that you find out is when he says "I'm alive," you think it's the second coming of Jesus Christ, is what they're strongly alluding to. And then you find it's this guy who's actually in a cell who presumably isn't Jesus Christ, and he's basically there because of the issues he's had at home, and he's in a straitjacket. And it's really chilling stuff. The bit that Dennis always mentions, and he's great, is they said to Glenn Buxton, you couldn't say to the lead guitarist Glenn Buxton, play this, play that, and be technical, but you could say to him, play guitar like a lunatic's escapes, whatever the phrase would be. And he could do that for you. And the guitar solo he comes up with when Dwight Frye escapes from the asylum is truly scary. He really, really does make that very scary indeed. But as he escapes, you get this explosion, this huge explosion that rattles the speakers. And it's an Alka-Seltzer tablet dropping into water, sort of slowed down and amplified. That's the first time they use that effect. They use it a few times, actually. And it just sounds like a big explosion, but it's actually just a tablet dropping into water, amplified.
Never would have known that. Back to that voice. Was this friend, so it wasn't an actual child? It was an adult woman?
No. She's an adult woman.
Man.
Well, as adults as they are.
She sounded like a kid. Yeah.
She's not a kid. No, it's not a kid. No children were harmed or used in the recording of Love It to Death at all.
And he had to change the spelling of Frye. The original actor's name was Frye, and then he removed the E? Okay. That was for legal reasons, I'm assuming?
Well, I suspect it was. I mean, it's either they just didn't know how he spelt his name, and this is pre-internet days where it could be difficult to find things out back in those days, or whether they just thought that would distance it slightly. But yeah, they do change the spelling. There's a big story that Alice had said, and apparently he's known for exaggerating his stories and changing them a bit for effect, Alice Cooper. And there was a thing I'd read years ago where he'd actually said that there's the last track on the album is the cover of Sunrise. And he'd actually said that it was a cleaner who was outside with a vacuum cleaner and was singing. And they thought she was so good they brought her in to do the wailing, if you like, on the end of Sunrise. And I told Neal Smith, the drummer, is it true that it was the cleaner who came in? And he just laughed and laughed and laughed. He said, is that one of Alice's stories you've heard? And I said, well, yeah, it was, Neil. And he goes, no, absolutely not true. It was a gospel choir in the next studio. Those guys were just terrific, and we just got one of them in. So I don't know who, but
Alice is the Judy Garland of rock and roll. Judy Garland, famous for coming up with some fun stories, harmless, but a lot of times not true. Theatrics.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, Love It to Death, and the cover of Love It to Death is superb as well, which I think Queen did actually. They must have seen it because they sort of lock, stock, and barrel borrow that for Queen too.
Well, you talked to all the guys who did all the great artwork on these albums and designed the packaging, because that's a huge part of the 70s, huge part of Alice's history too. Those albums, the way they were presented.
Yeah, I mean, very expensive, Eric. I mean, as we're coming on, the Schools Out album, particularly in $1 Billion Babies and Muscle of Love, those are very expensive packages. Gatefold sleeves, Schools Out standing up like a desk, $1 Billion Babies, an opening wallet with a banknote, and then Muscle of Love, an old cardboard box that you open up. And I mean, those were expensive to produce back in the day. You just wouldn't do that anymore. So yeah, terrific stuff from Ernie Cefalu and the team at Pacific Ioneer, who came up with those designs for Alice later on.
What a great time. I told you before we went on the air here, before we started recording, I have two older brothers, and one introduced me to the cassette era, but my oldest brother had a lot of those albums. And even just recently, within the last few years, he pulled out Jethro Tull's Stand Up, and you see all the band members Open that gatefold, and there they are saying, what a great time. What a great time. And that the thing was to capture the attention of the music buying audience as they're walking through the aisles of a record shop. What's going to stand out? What's going to grab them? Sometimes it was something as simple and beautiful as Dark Side of the Moon. Sometimes it would, with the Prism. Sometimes it would be something loud and just screaming out at you as you walk by it. But whatever the case may be, there was a lot of effort that went into those.
Yeah, I spoke to Ernie Cefalu of Pacific Pioneer, and his idea was, and this is going to come as a bit of a shock to some listeners, the idea was you got your album, you put it on. Now, what are you going to do? What are you going to do now? You haven't got a mobile phone or anything or an internet or whatever. So Ernie's idea was that you open the packaging up again and you engaged with this packaging while the album is playing. You've got the packaging, you've got the album, the two together. So you're looking at this, you're looking at the pictures, you're reading the lyrics, you're soaking in the packaging while the album is playing. And that was his whole concept of what you would do.
Did Alice put his lyrics in all of his albums?
No. The lyrics appear from 1973.
Okay.
With the $1 Billion Babies album. That was the first time.
Yeah, interesting. That was something that not all albums, you would think, it was a given they'd have all the lyrics in there, but that wasn't really a priority, it seemed, all the time. Some artists, I think Elton John talked about that. He wanted lyrics in there because of Bernie Taupin. He says, I want his lyrics in there because they are super important to the song. But yeah, it depended on the artist and I guess the label too.
Alice, I think, wrote most of the lyrics. Some of the band members, Michael Bruce and Dennis and Neil, would chip in with lyrics themselves as well, or even in their own songs. Certainly, I think the Schools Out album, they could have put the lyrics in for, and that would have made a difference there. Prior to that date, maybe they didn't feel the lyrics were worthy of printing and sort of pouring over in that way. So I guess that was the reason behind that.
Let's talk stage theatrics. You can't leave out stage theatrics when you talk about Alice Cooper. So the guillotine, the live snakes, the straitjacket, so many iconic images connected to Alice. If you could talk about when that began to emerge, how important that was and still is when talking about Alice Cooper.
Well, it had always been there. Theatrics had been, even from back when they were the Earwigs and the Spiders, they were aware that theatrics was important. When they were the Spiders, they had a spider's web on stage, and they always knew that this was important. They certainly adopt the kind of the horror elements comes strongly into the show, bringing in snakes to use and so on, because a snake represents different things to different people, I think, was what Neal Smith, the drummer, said. Some people think it's kind of sexy, some people find it horrific, and whatever, and that kind of thing. So the basic concepts, I think, that the Cooper Group with say, certainly after Bob Ezrin, from the era when they signed to Warner Brothers and they're touring to promote Love It to Death, the idea was the show would start with some rock songs, sort of the light going into the dark and then back into the light again, so that things would get steadily more sort of horrific or difficult or whatever as the show went on, and theatrics would get more challenging. And this would generally involve Alice being executed for some crimes or whatever on stage, And the first one they came out with on the Love It to Death tour was the electric chair. They used the electric chair for Alice to die in that way. And then they moved to the hanging for the Killer album, which they kept all the way through 72. And then the guillotine, which they kept as well for a while. And to some extent, Alice still uses the guillotine, has used the guillotine for many decades now. I think he's been doing that as well. Dangerous, I believe. I think it took Alice some time to actually decide to lie there and believe that these safety catches were going to work. The one he actually had trouble with was the execution by hanging. I think on at least a couple of occasions, the safety rope hasn't worked and he has been dangling effectively by the rope around his neck. I think there was a double-edged sword as well, which was that it was as the shows became more theatrical, extreme, it started to become more about Alice the singer than the rest of the band, because Alice is now doing most of the publicity as well. So the rest of the band, who was still part of the Alice Cooper name, is kind of drifting into the background maybe a bit. And also I think that theatrics and the shows, which are great, Eric, terrific, it does kind of overshadow the music a little bit sometimes. You say to people, I like Alice Cooper, and they instantly think of guillotines and dead babies and and all of those things happening on the stage, you know, they wouldn't necessarily think, oh yeah, that album was terrific. The music was really good on that, you know. So I think to some extent that the music did get overshadowed a bit, and I think maybe the band members would agree with that, you know.
Yeah.
There's a track on the Killer album, which I suspect you're coming to, Halo of Flies, which is my favourite track by the Cooper Group by a very long way. I mean, that's absolutely an extraordinary piece of work, but you won't hear anybody mention it who's not an Alice Cooper fan.
At the end of the day, the songs have to stand up. People aren't going to go just to watch the explosions or, in Alice's case, the guillotine. They're going to also hear the songs. And most of Alice's shows are made up of these classic songs that came out in the 1970s. They stand the test of time, yeah.
I think for the fans, yeah, they appreciated that the music was great, the shows were great then. But, you know, because Alice had got to the stage where they were outside their own fan base, even like your parents or other people who didn't like the band were aware of what they did, and they would downplay it for that, like they do with Kiss, you know, oh, they just do this, they just do that, you know, and but not really engaging with the music because it's not their sort of thing. So they just see them as that band who shock or whatever, you know.
Yeah, I just think it's important to have the music look like it sounds on stage. So I'm a fan of all kinds of music. I'm a huge Grateful Dead fan. Grateful Dead didn't need to do much other than get up there and play and maybe have a big screen with some psychedelic swirls going on in the background there. But when you go to see Alice Cooper, you want that music to look like it sounds.
Yeah, when I was younger, I mean, because Alice hadn't played Britain for so long, we used to buy bootleg tapes, you know, which were on cassette. And I'd ordered a copy of Alice at Hollywood Bowl 72, and it came on cassette. I've not heard the Cooper Band live at this stage. There was nothing to hear over here, nothing. And I put this on, and it opens up, and you think, what are they playing? And it was like, you think, there's this long, drawn-out, feedbacky guitar, and you're thinking, I've no idea what they're opening with here at all. I don't even recognise this. And it's just this growing pulse and this excitement that you can hear in the music. You think, this is great. And then suddenly you think, gosh, this is Public Animal No. 9 of the School's Out album. And on that album, it's this kind of real jazz swingy piece, sort of blowing really hard. It's got riffs in it. It's terrific. But live, a lot of that subtlety was just gone, and it just comes racing out the tracks at you like a hurricane. And it's just as terrific as the album version. So they could really turn it on stage. They really could, that band, when they were on it, they really were.
Yep. And Love It to Death became the template for the following records. That was another huge album. The band followed with Killer, released in November of 71 in the US, February of 72 in the UK, reached number 21 on Billboard. John Lydon of the Sex Pistols called it the best rock album ever made. Bob Ezrin, again, plays a big role. Everything is bigger and better than before.
It's Killer. He's just I think I call the book cinematic, and it really, really is. It just comes. It's just so vibrant and colourful, and just comes blasting out. It's got all kinds of different feels and atmospheres and dynamics on the album, and you play it through, and it's like finished before you know it. It's from start to finish. It's just it's a thrill ride. Absolutely terrific album. I think Dennis, Mike, and Neil, who I interviewed for the book, they all single out the Love It to Death Killer era as their favourite. Because I think the band still at this stage had a lot of control over what was happening to their music in the studio and how it was. They still felt that it was a lot about what they wanted, which kind of starts to fall away probably, I guess.
And Dennis Dunaway wrote Under My Wheels.
Yeah, I mean...
I love that story. Glenn Buxton was concerned it was going to be a sappy love song. Not so, said Dennis.
That's right, yeah. Yeah. Well, I think because when you read the lyrics and Dennis would have played in the demo, and you think, yeah, some sappy love song, we don't do that. No, we're going to kind of riff this up, and you can do this, you do that, and very much not. The one that got me when I was younger, I'm going back to when I was a teen, was in like You Drive Me Nervous with Glenn's kind of psycho guitar, if you like, on it. The nervous guitar that he plays is just outstanding on it. And then you got Alice's alleged tribute to Jim Morrison, you know, on Desperado with the acoustics and so on that, and terrific. But you talk to me about Killer, and all day long I'm going to say Halo of Flies, Eric. That's the one, Halo of Flies.
Yeah, let's get to Halo of Flies. And this is credited to Alice, Glenn Buxton, Bruce Dunaway, and Neal Smith. This is a collective effort. 8 minutes, 22 seconds.
It's not just my favorite of the album, it's my favorite Cooper band. And, you know, if they listen to this stage, we are still a band. We're still, Alice Cooper is a band. Yeah, it's my favorite song by them because you've got everything for me that made that band what it is. That's great about everything is in those 8 minutes.
Very progressive, King Crimson like.
I think Alice at one stage, if I remember, had said that he felt that people weren't taking him seriously. People were just thinking, oh, they're just a Theatrics band. They can't play. And so they decided to do this to show they can play, you know, and by God, they really do play. It's an extraordinary thing to pull off. And they pulled that off on stage every night, exactly as it is. And Alice himself isn't on all of the song. He's only on, I forget what I listed as in the book, but he's only on about 3-4 minutes, I think, of it, something like that.
You call it the most spellbinding track they ever recorded. Thrilling journey through their influences with the twists and turns of a Hollywood blockbuster soundtrack. What is the song about?
It's basically an homage, I would say, to the spy films that they loved, the Bond movies, like The Man from U.N.C.L.E., all that kind of stuff. It's basically a spy film puts into song on an album. If you listen to what they're playing in the background, it all sounds like it could be the backdrop to some sort of scene in a Bond film or something. There's a bit in there where they move to like Egypt or the Far East or somewhere, and the music changed, some sort of kind of like Jonathan Richman, almost Egyptian reggae kind of feel beat starts coming in. So it's just beautifully cinematic. Bob Ezrin's on it as well. He plays a Moog synthesizer on it.
Yeah, Ezrin gets songwriting credit on some of these too. I know he's important in that sense too. He also helped craft songs for Kiss too. He's not just producer; he's part songwriter.
He was a multi-instrumentalist, as we'll come back to later. He could play anything. He could play guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, a Moog synthesizer. He could write lyrics. He could do arrangements. A handy man to have around, definitely. And he was a producer as well. And in Halo of Flies, we even get, the very first drum and bass solo. Is that the first one ever? Probably. Neil records the drums in the bathroom at the studios, RCA.
Yeah, the ladies' restroom. The ladies' restroom of the RCA studios in Chicago.
No ladies were there at the time, we don't believe. But, Dennis actually decides what to play, that throbbing, pulsing bass, the dum, da dum, da dum, da 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 dum, da, and he plays this. And as he said himself, you're in the moment. You're recording for the album, aren't you? Da-da-da-da-da. Not realizing that when you're going to play live, you're stuck with that. And if Neil decides he's going to play longer on his drum solo, you're still stuck with that intense bass. And I think, as he says in the book, he says many nights be going, man, hurry up, I'm dying here. Get out the drum solo fast. I can't keep this beat up. But it's absolutely terrific. A big ending as well on it. It's just everything about what the band were trying to do in one song. Without a doubt.
I want to get to Desperado as well, but real quickly, Rick Derringer's on the solo on one of the tracks, Under My Wheels. That's an interesting piece of Alice trivia.
Controversial.
Yeah.
Well, I think at this stage, should we say some people might not turn up, maybe on time for sessions. And if you're the producer, your job is to bring things in on budget. And I think Derringer was called in or happened to be there. There's different versions of this, but certainly Rick Derringer came in when Buxton was or wasn't there and did a lead guitar solo. Now, Dennis Dunaway says that Glenn Buxton had already recorded a lead guitar solo that he liked for Under My Wheels. And that's the one you can hear on the old grey whistle test footage on YouTube. You can hear Buxton play his solo. The curious thing is what Ezrin does is he records Rick Derringer's solo, which is terrific, and then completely buries it in the mix under a wall of brass. I've no idea why he does that.
You use the word puzzled. Band members were puzzled by that.
I don't see the point of it. Sometimes some of Ezrin's production tricks just pass me by, and that one I don't get. The guy's clearly playing a terrific solo. You can hear that. So why put the brass all over it? I don't get that at all. So that's one of the few missteps I think he makes.
The Booked on Rock podcast will return after this.
This is Ken Womack, co-author of All Things Must Pass Away.
This is Jason Krupa, and you're listening to the Booked on Rock podcast
with Eric Sinich.
We're back with more of the Booked on Rock podcast. Desperado is interesting because in later years we found out that Alice was a friend of Jim Morrison. Interesting.
He seems to become more of a friend of Jim Morrison as the years. I'm not saying he wasn't a friend. Certainly they were friends, but he seems to have talked about it a lot more as the years went by. I don't remember him really mentioning it back in the day too much, but he mentions it an awful lot now when he talks about it. And Morrison certainly had died and certainly does fit that kind of rock star outlaw image that perhaps he's going for. But equally so, I do think probably Robert Vaughan in The Magnificent Seven it actually reads like a straight description of him. What he wore in the film and how he was. So I think it was definitely Robert Vaughan that it was on his mind at the time from The Magnificent Seven.
The band is hot at this point, only getting hotter. School's Out, released June 13th, 1972, produced again by Bob Ezrin. Number 2 album, so these albums keep going higher and higher up with each successive album release. The packaging drew some controversy. The publicity didn't hurt, though. Can you talk about what happened and Alice's brilliant quote in response to it?
Yeah, well, you're talking about the panties, aren't we? Yeah. The idea was, I think Ernie Cefalu had presented the packaging to Shep Gordon of this stand-up school desk, and it was decided. I think it was Shep who decided to put the record in these disposable panties, and thereby then making sure later that the customs people or whatever found out about these coming because it was illegal to import them into the country for some reason or another. So he made sure they knew about this so you could get more controversy and publicity. And then, of course, Alice does deliver the quote on it, which I can't remember exactly what he said at this moment. So, can you help me out?
I've got it right in front of me here.
Oh, you have?
I know we're hot right now, but I never thought our panties would catch on fire.
It's brilliant. Absolutely, because they were thought to be flammable, or inflammable, whichever one is it. I forget which, but the idea was they could catch fire.
Yeah.
And that was just, and you can imagine the press corps going, "Yep, thanks, Alice, that'll do quite nicely for us." And then they dropped these panties by helicopter at the Hollywood Bowl show all over the audience. One of whom was Elton John, gleefully trying to catch a pair of disposable panties from a helicopter.
Oh boy!
Lucky Elton.
So let's talk about the title track, School's Out, built around a lead that Glenn Buxton had been playing for years.
Yeah, well, he actually, I think, got it from, those kids' playground things where you're going, na, 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 and you're wagging your finger at kids and that kind of, and that's where the riff comes from. It's that na, 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 and it's that kind of, but that's a speaker rattling riff that it comes out with. And one of the greatest riffs, I think, you talk about classic rock great riffs, The Smoke on the Waters and A Whole Lot of Loves and whatever. This School's Out riff is right up there at the top of the tree with them. And we'd hear that on the radio in 1972 when you're my age and you can only listen to what's coming on the radio. And that came out. You just thought, wow. That's what I want.
That's so cool, though. I never thought about that. So it's like the kids. Na, 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 na.
Yeah, it's that kind of kids' playground when you're teasing in the playground and making fun of somebody or having to go back at somebody. And that's where it comes from. And Dennis Dunaway, he always said that we'd have been the kids at the back of the class. We'd have been the ones at the back causing the trouble. And the song's got this really good bolero beat on all the way through. It's kind of like a bolero, dun, da, 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 on the chorus.
Right.
So it's got that real tense bolero beat. And Dennis not playing down on the low notes with Neil. He gets out of the way. He plays high on the bass so that the toms, Neil's toms have actually got room to be heard in the mix. And then you got the kids, the bratty kids from the stage school, terrific stuff.
They brought him in from a nearby school.
They were very nervous, as you would be, wouldn't you? I mean, and I think their parents are probably more nervous as well, but they came in from a nearby school. And on one of the box sets that we've been kind of overloaded with in the recent times, on one of the Alice Cooper ones, the old school box set, you can hear them rehearsing with the kids and trying to get them to, get that kind of real spirit into the voice. Yeah, come on, guys, you can do it a bit better than this. And they do. You can hear them really growing into that vocal.
They were scared at first. Yeah, they saw the guys in the band looking the way they looked.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine?
You would. Yeah, you would. But yeah, absolutely terrific.
I am very intrigued by this Zodiac Killer connection with School's Out. Talk about that one.
Well,
There's a possible connection to something that the Zodiac wrote in a letter.
Well, yeah, and that's something I found out myself, and no one's ever twigged on that. I do know that Alice Cooper has had a long interest in serial killers. He did an entire album around a serial killer. Later, along came a spider. So, I mean, this is a known fact. And I know he's collected autographs of various nefarious people in history. He collects that kind of thing. So I thought I'd do a Google search about this phrase, "schools out," because the idea was that he got it from an old film, a Bowery Boys kind of old film. And he'd always said it came from that. But that seemed a bit fudged as where it had come from. So I thought I'd just Google the phrase "schools out." And, of course, it comes up Alice Cooper. And then one search, it came up Zodiac Killer. I thought, what? And the phrase, "school is out," for some, is in one of the Zodiac Killer's letters that was actually transcribed. In case the listeners don't know, he was this killer, the Zodiac Killer in America. And he sent these letters to the press that were done as a series of graphics and symbols, a couple of which I think have still not been transcribed and worked out to this day, the code he used, but that one was. And of course, reading this, "school is out," there, and realising that Alice, even back in 72, 71, 70, must have been already interested in serial killers, I would suspect. And this was in the national press. I think subconsciously he must have been aware of this, in my opinion. I thought it was a fun thing to put in, given his connection with serial killers and his interest in it.
Very possible. I just listened to a podcast on the Grateful Dead, and he talked about a song, "Wharf Rat," and a line in the song that said, "Ask you for a dime for a cup of coffee," I think is the lyric. And the host brought up the fact that there's a line in Streetcar Named Desire with Marlon Brando, where the guy goes up to Brando and says, "Can I ask you for a dime for a cup," like literally word for word. So yeah, those things can come across, like you say, either subconsciously or consciously. Certainly something that Alice would be interested in. Yeah, for sure.
I'm not sure he would have actually said at the time, "Oh yeah, I got the line from the letter from the Zodiac Killer," and maybe he would have done that then. I'm not sure, but it's certainly the only other cultural reference I can see to that phrase that predates the song.
And now we get to what many believe is Alice's masterpiece, Billion Dollar Babies, released in late February 1973. Number one, both the U.S. and U.K. Interesting, some of this album was recorded right here where this podcast originates, Connecticut, in Greenwich, Connecticut, along with a record plant in New York and Morgan Studios in London. Bob Ezrin, back behind the boards. Talk about Billion Dollar Babies.
Well, I think it's probably Ezrin's high watermark, if you like, with the band, and certainly his fingerprints have been getting stronger, and his ideas have been getting more forceful. It's certainly it's the peak of what Bob Ezrin does with Alice Cooper. You can hear that in terms of the production. He also brings in outside players to play on the album, and there are a number of reasons I suspect for that. One is that maybe he wanted to bring in some different flavours on some of the guitar parts, but we do know that Glenn Buxton was by now extremely ill and was struggling. Then again, Dennis, the bass player, has said that Glenn could have come and done his parts. It might have been difficult sometimes to get him to come and do them. Might have meant waiting a bit for when he was prepared to do it, whereas the session guys will just turn up and do those parts. So now we start to get Mick Mashbeer, who plays guitar on a lot of the album. Steve Hunter plays guitar on the album. Dick Wagner plays guitar on the album as well. So I think what happens there, if you're bringing in outside players, you're changing the sound of the band quite substantially, maybe. So it's becoming more of a Bob Ezrin, Alice Cooper concept album, if you like. It's losing the kind of the connection of what made the band what it was, say, back in the Love It to Death Killer days. So if you like the original Cooper band, then Love It to Death Killer probably gives you more of it when they had a big say and controlled in what they were doing. Billion Dollar Babies is the most successful album, but I think that it's problematic in that way in terms of the production of Ezrin's involvement in it. It's certainly, there's a link. You can go from Billion Dollar Babies to Welcome to My Nightmare, and those two albums are both produced by Bob Ezrin. Billion Dollar Babies and then the first Alice Cooper solo album, Welcome to My Nightmare. In between that, you've got Muscle of Love, not produced by Bob Ezrin, which kind of sticks out like a sore thumb between those two. Really, the difference is there. But again, it's that big production values, and it's bombastic and impressive, and it's the first track is, I suppose, technically a cover version, although Alice rewrote nearly all the lyrics. Hello, hooray! And it's probably another one of my favourite Cooper songs to this day. But listening to that, Glenn Buxton doesn't play on it. Michael Bruce, I think, plays rhythm guitar on it, maybe. So you're losing some of, the band flavour in that, I would say.
The title track was sung with Donovan.
Yeah.
Started out as a Roy Orbison-like ballad, too, written by Reggie Vincent, who played guitar and added vocals on School's Out.
He was a friend of the band. He was actually, I think, one of Glenn Buxton's friends, Reggie Vincent. So he was one of those guys who'd hang around with a guitar, and he did backing vocals back as far as Killer, Reggie Vincent. You needed a backing vocalist or somebody to add something. Reggie would be there because he was always there. And when they were working out songs for the album, if Glenn wasn't down there to work out the songs or whatever, Reggie would be there and would step in. And he came up with this Roy Orbison type ballad, says Dennis, called, for the title track, $1 Billion Babies, which, as Dennis correctly says, you're not going to have a Roy Orbison type ballad as a title track of an Alice Cooper album. Dennis says what they actually ended up with had nothing whatsoever to do with a Roy Orbison type ballad or anything that Reggie Vincent had written whatsoever. But as he says, we wouldn't have got to there if Reggie hadn't come in with his Roy Orbison ballad that we changed around completely, which is why he's on the credits.
I mentioned Greenwich, Connecticut. Is it the Gillespie Estate?
Yeah. Anne Margaret used to live there.
Who did?
Anne Margaret, the actress. She was I think she was one of the last residents. And it was one of these big estates. And the band used it as a base. They lived together there. And they used the ballroom area because you could actually rehearse a stage show in the ballroom. It was so big. And there was lots of places around the house where you could record. And as you know, by this stage in the 70s, people were getting into recording, let's try this in the bathroom, let's try this in the cupboard, and let's try doing that there to get the different sounds and textures. So the Gillespie Estate allowed them to do some different kinds of recording. And they also came to London, England when they were over playing on the European tour, 72. They actually stopped for a week or two and recorded in Morgan Studios in London and did some recording there for $1 Billion Babies. It's certainly, I think, the pinnacle of what they achieved as a band in terms of success and sales.
No More Mr. Nice Guy is another one.
Absolutely terrific song and riff. A Michael Bruce song that he'd had knocking around since the Killer album days. It had been knocking around, and finally it came out on $1 Billion Babies. Alice changed some of the lyrics to make it about himself. Yes,
I was going to say another great call by Alice. Make the lyrics about himself, and it paid off. It worked.
And of course, before the album had come out, they'd had a hit single leading into that album with Elected, which had come out before the album. Because you guys had got an election over there in November 72, I think it was, And so they wanted something to tie in with the election. And they went back to Reflected off British for You and rewrote that as Elected, basically the melody from that. And that was another big single for Alice.
$1 Billion Babies, huge success. The tour, a huge success. Alice is on top of the world. But now we start to see some of the cracks here. There's no time to take a vacation. They need to capitalize, make another album, make it fast. Muscle of Love, the follow-up released less than a year after $1 Billion Babies. $1 Billion Babies came out in February of 73. Muscle of Love, November of 73. But as you said, different producer. Jack Richardson and Jack Douglas of Aerosmith fame produced it. Some of it produced at Sunset Sound in Hollywood, which is where Van Halen recorded their first 5 classic albums there. Ezrin not back because he had a falling out with the band.
Yeah, Ezrin has said so. He turned up for the first days of recording and had an argument with at least one of the band. I believe he came in and went, no. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do this. You want to be doing this. And I think kind of the resentment or whatever that had been simmering in some quarters, you don't tell us what to do. We're the band, and treat us a bit more respect. And Ezrin stormed off, and then they got Jack Richardson and Jack Douglas in to produce it. And what you get actually in, and you have to remember back in the day, bands like Uriah Heep as well and Black Sabbath, they were knocking out a couple of albums a year and touring when they weren't recording, and absolutely ridiculously heavy workload. And really what the Cooper group needed was a break. perhaps bang a greatest hits or a live album out, and to come back in, I think, in 1974 with an album and just get away from it for a while. The madness. And not actually try and write another album. And Michael Bruce had got some songs lying around. Most of the album, I think, was started by Michael Bruce from his songs. But Muscle of Love actually sounds more like, to me, like a bit like a follow-up to Love It to Death, if you like, in some respects. And it starts off, as soon as you put the needle down, side one, track one, Big Apple Dreaming Hippo is a great song. I love the song. It's a really good song. But it's not that kind of powerful in-your-face opener that we've had on Love It to Death, Killer, School's Out, $1 Billion Babies. It's kind of a bit minor key and a bit sort of, you know. And then you've got a package that you can't easily put into the shops because it's in a box, a quite fragile box, really. So record dealers have got a problem with it as well. And there are sparkling moments on it because this band can certainly turn out sparkling moments and great bits on it. But really, they needed a break, and it probably shouldn't have come out when it did, in my opinion.
The Booked on Rock podcast will return after this. We're back with more of the Booked on Rock podcast. To this day, all 5 members of the band have their own perspective on why that lineup broke up, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yes. They certainly do.
What are the various reasons? Substance abuse, creative differences, money, all of the above?
Well, let's start with the fact that I think some of the band decided to do solo albums. I know Michael Bruce had stockpiling material, thought, I'm going to do a solo album. And Neal Smith had material for a solo album. And so Alice decided he'd do a solo album, but for his solo album, he's going to go and work with Bob Ezrin again, who he wished he'd worked with on Muscle of Love. And for a band, they look at the people, Dick Wagner, who's been ghosting on the recent albums, Steve Hunter, who's been ghosting on the albums, and they've been playing with Lou Reed. So it was Lou Reed's live band who effectively turned up to record Alice's Welcome to My Nightmare. Now, if Alice does an album on his own, Alice Cooper, and this sells as much as it did, you've instantly got a problem, haven't you? Because you've got a new Alice Cooper album that's a solo album, not by the band, but the public, a lot of them are not going to necessarily maybe be as bothered by that as they should or could. It's a new Alice Cooper album, it's great and we like it. And what's Alice going to do? I think, is he going to go back to a band that's maybe kind of struggling with issues and troubles, or is he going to stay somewhere that's working as it is? And I suspect that's what happened. Glenn Buxton said the band just drifted apart. I certainly know that the other guys, Dennis, Neil and Mike, were waiting for Alice to come back and were working on material for the new band album, but Alice didn't come back. So clearly I think Alice needed a break to get away from them. But his career was doing well. Now, if nobody had bought Welcome to My Nightmare and it hadn't done well, I reckon, of course, he would have come back. And there's any doubt about that at all.
Isn't that interesting? The success of the album actually is a detriment to the future of the Alice Cooper band.
Yeah, but I think because of the way the publicity had been going for years, I mean, to this day, you can say to people, you like Alice Cooper, and they'll go, oh, I like him. And I don't get that because I come from the days when it wasn't a him, it was the 5 guys. Well, and some people say to me, did you regret not talking to Alice for the book? People say, oh, I bet you wish you got Alice. And I say, well, no, I got Michael, Dennis and Neil. And they go, who? Well, the other guys and Alice Cooper. Yeah. And to me, they're equally important. There's no difference to me.
It helped a lot that they got back together. It was 2017. So that helped to reintroduce them or introduce them to people that never even realized of their importance to this band.
Yeah, I think so. I think there'd been meetings before then when they'd met and gone on. I think certainly Alice and Dennis had been talking a lot. But certainly the reunion is, which now amounts to a couple of tracks, it seems, on each new album that Alice does.
Yeah.
It would be nice to hear a full Alice Cooper band album going forward again. The time is running out.
Yeah. Alice Cooper Goes to Hell follows in the summer of 76. That's a loose link to Welcome to My Nightmare, Ezrin producing again. Some lineup changes, a more mainstream sound, more accessible songs. I Never Cry was a number 12 single. That's written about Alice's problems with drinking, which would eventually derail Alice's career.
Yeah, I think going back, and I listened to these albums so many times writing the book, going through them again and again and again forensically. The thing that strikes me with the solo albums is there's great material on there and terrific songs. What is missing is the spirit that the other guys in the original band brought to it. It's a sense of a shared vision. And what you've got now is the vision is down to one or two people. It's Alice and Bob Ezrin's vision, and maybe Dick Wagner's. So it's three people. And their vision seems to roughly dovetail down the line, really. So the odd stuff that Dennis Dunaway would have brought in and the input that Neal Smith brought in is missing. And those influences that they brought in is missing. So I think that there's a kind of a more homogenized rock sound, if you like, going on in the Alice Cooper solo years. And again, it's not to say there's not really good songs and strong material, but what made the original band unique is certainly missing as soon as he goes solo, I would say, to be honest.
1977 brought Lace and Whiskey. Alice's guitarist Dick Wagner later said it was a disjointed album. Alice plays a character in the vein of Inspector Clouseau called Maurice Escargot.
It was a baffling album when it came out over in Britain. And you looked at it, and of course, you've still got the other albums that you've grown up with. You've been on that journey, and you're trying to connect this with that. And it's like something sailing slightly off into the distance, maybe, but you can still see the legacy of it and some of what's gone before. But you realize that things have dynamically changed. It's still Alice. Yeah, of course it's still Alice, but it's a different Alice as well to what we've had. So, it was interesting times. And I think, Lace and Whiskey does certainly have some songs on there that are fairly terrible. And I find You and Me still a desperately difficult song to like. It's a good song. And this is the interesting thing, isn't it, Eric? You can say You and Me. Is it a well-crafted song? Is it a well-written song? Absolutely it is. But do I like it? Not very much, no.
Hit singles don't necessarily equate with good songs, because that You and Me was number 3 in Canada, 2 in Australia. Let's see, in the U.S., number 9. That was his last U.S. top 10 hit until Poison 12 years later.
Yeah.
So it did well.
Absolutely, I can't knock that. But I if you were doing like a compilation, say one of your listeners said, "Oh, do me." We used to do CDs and cassette compilations back in the day to introduce somebody to somebody's music. If you remember those days, I'm not going to be putting anything, I think, from that album, Lace and Whiskey. Maybe the Lace and Whiskey itself or It's Hot Tonight might go on it, but certainly not You and Me. No. I don't think I could totally inflict that on anyone as well as he did.
Yeah, and Alice was in a rough place at that time. He wanted to check himself into rehab, but Warner says, nope, we need a live album. 2 shows booked in Vegas. Get out there and keep working. The result is the Alice Cooper Show live album released in December of 1977 at a time when live albums were doing very well. Not a memorable live album, unfortunately.
No. And again, I don't know what the reaction has been to what I said about that. There's some people I checked online in advance and they love the album. And it's got Dick Wagner on guitar, Steve Hunter guitar, Prakash John bass, the lineup's stellar, but there's something just not happening on there for me. Alice is clearly going through the motions on it at best, and the sound on it is terrible. It's just terrible, I think.
And so again, at a time when these bands were capitalizing, if they had recorded one of his shows 2, 3, 4 years earlier, might have been a different ball game. Yeah, they did.
They had. I mean, 1973, for example, the $1 Billion Babies tour, stuff's come out since, decades later. But of course, they wanted to reflect Alice as he was at the time, probably 74 or late 73. And I'm not saying this in hindsight. I think if they put out a live album into 73, giving the band a bit of time off and then come back in 74, that would have been very useful, I think, for them. But that 1977 live album, the Alice Cooper Show, I think is just dry. And have you listened to it? Do you know it?
No. I'm going to admit, I'm going to be honest, haven't even listened to it. I'll give it a listen just to see if I agree with what your thoughts are, or if I'm more towards those who say it's a great live album. I got to give it a listen.
Well, I think I can't see you thinking it's great, because I think the trouble is you put it on and like I'm 18 and so on, and you think, yeah, okay, it's good, but I'd rather have that. It's not a more exciting version of I'm 18 or Under My Wheels. No, they're actually, in my opinion, it just sounds inferior all the way through.
Yeah, because Alice was pretty burnt out by the time these shows were recorded.
Yeah, he was. But I think even some of the recording, or somehow the way the guitars and the bass and the drums have been recorded, it just sounds terribly dry and unexciting. And it could have been so much better, should have been so much better.
Well, I want to listen to it just out of curiosity. Also, I want to mention Steve Hunter, because you've mentioned his name throughout. And as a big Van Halen guy, Steve Hunter's on David Lee Roth's 1991 solo album, A Little Ain't Enough. Underrated album, and Steve Hunter does some nice work on that. Did you know that?
Yeah. Yep. Steve Hunter is he's just, for me, one of the greatest guitar players that I love listening to. And the stuff that Hunter does, people aren't aware of. And I just want to throw a couple of things out there. On Hello Hooray and $1 Billion Babies, there's a pedal steel guitar in the middle of that song that is just to die for. It's just absolutely emotional, and he just soars. That's Steve Hunter. He just comes in, does this pedal steel solo, gets out, and it is just divine. Generation Landslide, the end of that, the lead guitar solo, he just comes in, he knows exactly what to do. He's got terrific tone, the quality of everything he plays, and probably that book will read like a love letter to Steve Hunter at many times, because I think every time he does something, I'll always tell you it's Steve Hunter, because the guy is just absolutely phenomenally talented guitar player. He really is. And for the listeners who are there going, what would I know him from? Well, he does all the guitars on Peter Gabriel's Salisbury Hill, and they'll probably know that. That's Steve Hunter, plays all the guitars on that.
Not too shabby. Yeah.
No, not too shabby at all.
Steve, if you're listening, thank you for your great work, because he's underappreciated. He's not the household name, but he is very well respected within the business. A lot of artists seek him out to bring him into the studio.
They do.
I mentioned Elton John earlier. Bernie Taupin contributed to Alice's next album, From the Inside, which is when this is after Alice gets sober, concept album about Alice's stay in a New York asylum due to his alcoholism, all based on people he met while he was in the asylum.
I think, I suspect, and I think I haven't read many of the reviews, I suspect that I'll probably upset a lot of people with what I think about this album. But I find it too busy. I find the lyrics too Bernie Taupin-ish. There's just too many words going on at times. The production I don't think much of, really. It's certainly not Bob Ezrin's kind of thing that he would have done. He didn't produce it. And there are moments, I think Steve Lukather from Toto comes in, and the tracks he plays and I really like. And I think there's an energy about the album, let's be fair. There's an energy and a strength that wasn't there on Lace and Whiskey. There's no doubt about that. And David Johnston's there on guitar as well. So it's certainly a more pumped up album with more life in it. But it's not an album I find I can warm to terribly well. I can enjoy it, and I like listening to it because, let's face it, it's Alice Cooper, and I'll always go for that. But I just think it's a little bit too slick for me.
Produced by David Foster.
Well, yeah, and the string arrangements. Sorry, David. For me, it's not the way Bob would have done it, and I know that, and I know he's got his own style. But you get something like the track "Serious" on that, where Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick plays guitar, and that comes roaring out the traps, and there's a swagger and an energy to it. Or For Veronica's Sake, Nurse Rosetta, those tracks have all got something. But then there are other tracks where it's just like syrup being poured onto you. Through the speakers. I'm just thinking,
yeah, I'm looking at Foster's Wikipedia page. So when he came into that album, it's interesting you say that. He had been working with Diana Ross, Donna Summer, Olivia Newton-John, Earth, Wind and Fire, Michael Jackson.
What is clearly going on here is...
He did Air Supply later.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can see what's happening here, can't you? There's a definite bid to try and... Well, he's done all that, and that's successful. And Alice now needs a big, successful chart album. I would guess that's why Foster is there, because that's what he delivers. But what you lose in that, I think, is that kind of Alice Cooper, maybe a bit. So I think it's a good album. There are people who say it's one of his best albums. And I don't think it is.
And what do you think about Alice's music in the 80s? A lot of peaks and valleys, but it ended on a high note.
You've got the difficult early 80s years, haven't you? Which over in Europe and Britain, I think we kind of embraced and got into. I don't know if it went down so well in America. And Alice had got problems, and he's now admitted himself that he got into cocaine addiction.
We could have lost him. Yeah, we could have lost him in those days. He was emaciated.
There's
looking.
a horrific video, yeah, the Tom Snyder film. Have you seen that on YouTube?
Yeah, sad to look at.
But on a brighter note, I first met Alice Cooper on the British tour to support the Special Forces album, and we set off at 9 o'clock in the morning, the day of the gig, determined to meet Alice Cooper. And we met him, I think it was about 6 o'clock that night. We'd actually been out for 9 hours trying to meet him, you know, and that's what you did. And we went around the hotels in Birmingham asking them if Alice Cooper was stopping there.
What year would this be?
No. This was 1982.
Okay.
And we went around saying, you know, is Alice Cooper stopping? No. And then we tried the Holiday Inn. Is Alice Cooper stopping it? Yes. I mean, it's bizarre, isn't it? Why would they tell you? So we waited there, and then other people had been doing the same. And by about 6 o'clock, I think it was about a dozen of us, 12 of us stood outside the Holiday Inn because there's no way in other than through the front door that we knew of. And we'd met so many famous people, every one of whom thought we were waiting to meet them. But then Alice's band turned up, which was an extremely reassuring moment, and none of whom thought we wanted to speak to them. But we did. And they were gracious about it. And then finally Alice turned up. My first thoughts were, oh, he's a lot shorter than I thought. Because, of course, he's wearing those big boots on stage and all this sort of business, you know. But he was extraordinarily friendly and welcoming in a way that you hoped he would be. But he took the time to sign everybody's album sleeves, and he had a bit of a chat. And I think we all asked him how Michael, Dennis, Neil and Glenn were from the old band, which he graciously told us that they were all okay, and he still talked to them and stuff. And you thought, you know, we've met Alice, because literally I'd grown up with him from, you know, the age of 10 and a half, and now there I was, face to face with Alice Cooper.
Surreal.
And that night when they did Generation Landslide on stage, and the entire front stalls, I think I pretty much knew everybody in the front stalls of the Birmingham Odeon, because we'd all communicated by post or telephone. It was the hardcore fans. And all of us who'd been at the Holiday Inn were leaning on the stage pretty much. And when he said, this song is for you, and pointed to the people in the front, which he obviously did every night, I should imagine, it just felt more meaningful to us because we'd actually all met him, you know. So it was a great moment. Those early 80s albums, yeah, there's a lot to enjoy on them. It's different. I think it's if you're a novice Cooper fan, you're not necessarily going to want to start there, but there's plenty to enjoy on those albums if you take them as what they are and don't compare them to the big legacy albums. There's some great stuff. And then later in the 80s, you go through that period where he comes back with Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell. They're kind of the heavy metal albums, which have their moments, some good stuff, but I don't think it was a natural fit for what Cooper could provide and do, but that's what he bounced back on the wave of, bringing back the Guillotine and some of the old songs. But certainly to get Cooper back on the top of the charts, the publicity, the promotions, the hit singles, you need to hook up with somebody who can do that. And the man who could do that was Desmond Child, who'd been doing it with Bon Jovi and all the other kind of guys he'd worked with at the time. Well, he'd worked with Kiss, hadn't he?
He did.
And I think there are a lot of fans who don't particularly think that the Trash album is a great one, that it's a Desmond Child album that Alice appears on. I think probably that's due for a bit of review. I think talking to some of the musicians, as I have been, who recorded that album, certainly Alice was way more involved than people might perceive him to have been in the recording of the Trash album. And it's of its time. Certainly did the job of putting Alice, which was a surprise to us over in Britain, that Alice was number 2 in the charts, singles charts with Poison, and Trash was doing well. And you just thought, wow. Because you see, you come from an age where people didn't have comebacks. You either had your moments and you were gone. And now we were seeing people having the second time around, if you like.
Yeah, and Poison, by the way, released on this month in 1989, summer of 89. That single was released.
And John McCurry, I spoke to him recently, and he wrote the melody and the guitar parts and so on for Poison. In fact, he'd already written them before. It was top of my head, I can't remember the song, but it's a John Waite song.
A John Waite song that John Waite released, or is it a John Waite song that he wrote for
It was
Alice?
released. John McCurry had worked with on the album that John Waite had done, and they contributed this song, which is on there.
Oh, okay.
And basically, the music for that becomes Poison. John Waite recorded it because McCurry wrote it when he recorded for him, but he didn't do anything. He didn't seem to get noticed. Okay. So when they're gathering to record Trash, McCurry's got this riff sequence and so on that he'd used with John Waite, and they just basically reused it for Poison.
I gotcha. Didn't know that.
The John Waite song, by the way, if any listeners want to check it out, somebody was called Encircled. If you play Encircled and he plays in a different key, you'll hear John McCurry's Poison riff.
Encircled.
Encircled. Encircled.
So do you plan on covering the rest of Alice's career?
Certainly the 80s is going to happen. And I've started on that, talking to musicians already. And it's been helpful having the 70s book out, because you can point to the fact you actually do these things. You say you're going to write a book and you've done it. So the 80s is happening. After that, it gets a little problematic because of Alice's output is a bit variable. He doesn't do much in the 90s in terms of recorded output. The 2000s he does. I would like to carry on with it because Alice is someone I've lived with for ages. Other people I'd like to do include Roxy Music, Sparks, and surprisingly, perhaps Chic is another one I'd like to do.
Alice Cooper in the 1970s is out now through Sonic Bond Publishing. It is available wherever books are sold. If you have a local independent bookstore, pick up a copy there. So you're supporting not just the author, but the local independent bookstore. I put a link to find your nearest bookstore on our show notes page. Any other sites that you want to direct people to get a copy?
Well, yeah, I'd certainly direct people to Sonic Bond Publishing's site, because there are, I can't thank Stephen Lamb, the publisher, enough, because he's basically enabled a lot of us who aren't necessarily what you would call professional writers to write about something we feel passionate about and love, like you do with your podcasts. And I'm aware that a lot of the press over in Britain and maybe in America, they do what's called critical writing, and I don't suppose you would call my book necessarily a critical thing, because it's more of a celebration. And that's what I wanted it to be. I just wanted people to buy the book, think, I need to go and listen to those albums again. If people do that, then my job is done. But there are so many books on the Sonic Bond website. He's got so many people writing about the music they feel passionate about it. It's fantastic.
sonicbondpublishing.co.uk. Chris Sutton, thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, sure. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Eric. Thank you so much.
Thanks to Chris Sutton for taking us through his book, Alice Cooper in the 1970s. Be sure to subscribe to Booked on Rock at Spreaker or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And if you like the podcast, make sure you give us a 5-star review. You can find us online at bookedonrock.com. That's bookedonrock.com. On Facebook at facebook.com/bookedonrockpodcast. On Twitter at bookedonrock. The email address is thebookedonrockpodcast@gmail.com. You can also contact me through the website. And if you're an author of a book on rock and you want to be on the podcast, just send me an email. I'm Eric Senich. Look forward to having you back again next time for another brand new episode of Booked on Rock.